That night, the storm wasn't just outside. It walked through the front doors of a five-star hotel wearing wet denim and worn canvas shoes. The woman they called Trash placed a black metal card on the counter and watched it get crushed under a manager's heel. "We don't serve people like you," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. What they didn't know was that the woman they mocked owned the very floor they stood on. In less than an hour, humiliation would turn into reckoning. Cameras would roll, jobs would crumble, and a single quiet voice would teach an entire company what respect really means. This isn't just a story about racism. It's about dignity, power, and how one woman turned the ugliest night of her life into a new beginning for everyone who ever felt unwelcome. The rain that night fell sideways, pushed by an Atlantic wind that made the palm trees outside the Haven Shore Hotel whip like frightened dancers. The lobby was nearly empty, its marble floor glowing in the soft light of a chandelier that flickered each time thunder rolled across the ocean. Naomi Carter stepped inside, brushing the rain from her denim jacket. Her shoes were soaked, her hair pulled into a low bun that had lost its shape during the storm. She looked like any other weary traveler, except for the way she carried herself, calm and upright, as if used to walking into rooms that didn't expect her. At the front desk, a blonde woman in a navy blazer glanced up from her computer. Her name tag read Becky, night manager. She smiled, the kind of smile that never reached the eyes. "Can I help you, ma'am?" Naomi set her canvas bag on the counter. "Just a cup of hot ginger tea, if your cafe's still open," she said softly. "And I'd like to check in after that." Becky's smile froze. "The cafe's closed, and check-in is for registered guests only." "I am a registered guest." Naomi reached into her bag and took out a black metal card. The edges caught the chandelier's light like a blade. "Naomi Carter, I have a reservation under." Becky didn't let her finish. She took the card between two fingers, flipped it over, and laughed. "Oh, that's cute. You found one of these online? We've had people try that before. Fake membership cards. Etsy's full of them." Naomi blinked once, slowly. "That card isn't fake." "Uh-huh." Becky dropped it onto the counter, where it clattered against the marble. The sound carried through the quiet lobby. "You'll have to leave, ma'am. This hotel doesn't serve walk-ins." The security guard near the entrance, broad shoulders buzz-cut, shifted his weight, watching the exchange. Naomi could feel his suspicion without even looking at him. She kept her voice level. "I'm not a walk-in. My reservation should be under the corporate account." Becky rolled her eyes and called over her shoulder. "Kyle, might need you here in a second." A flash of lightning lit the lobby, followed by a low growl of thunder. Somewhere deep in the building, a generator hummed. Naomi reached down and picked up her card. The metal was warm from Becky's fingers. She slipped it back into her wallet with deliberate care. "I'd like to speak to whoever's in charge tonight," she said. "That would be me," Becky replied, resting both hands on the counter. "And I'm telling you, we don't serve people who aren't staying here, especially not this late." The way she said people carried the same weight as a slap. Naomi glanced at the clock behind the desk. 10:48 p.m. She exhaled slowly, fighting the urge to react. 8 minutes before her online meeting with Tokyo, she could already imagine the faces waiting on that screen, executives in pressed suits, checking their watches. A young man appeared from the hallway, carrying a stack of folded towels. His name tag read Miguel, front desk associate. He stopped when he saw Naomi, his eyes narrowing with recognition. "Wait," he said, "aren't you—" "Miguel," Becky snapped. "Mind your business." He hesitated, then lowered his voice. "I just thought she looked familiar, that's all." Naomi offered him a faint smile. "It's all right," she said. "You're new here?" "First week," he admitted. "Then maybe you'll stay long enough to see how your management treats guests." Becky folded her arms. "You know what, lady? I've had a long day. Either you show me a legitimate booking or you take your attitude somewhere else." Two guests in evening clothes drifted past, glancing at Naomi with polite discomfort, the kind that said, "We see you, but we wish we didn't." A man at the bar chuckled, whispering something to his date. The woman turned her head, pretending not to stare. Naomi placed her phone on the counter and brought up an email. The blue light glowed against her calm face. "Here's my confirmation," she said. "Room 708, Haven Shore Hotel. Check in tonight." Becky leaned forward, squinting at the screen, then snorted. Anyone can fake an email. There's an app for that. She looked over her shoulder at the bartender. Mark, you got that mop ready? This woman's dripping all over the floor. Naomi said nothing. She gathered her coat around her shoulders and stepped back, giving Becky room to humiliate herself. You know what those shoes tell me? Becky said suddenly, her voice loud enough for the bar to hear. They tell me you didn't come from the kind of neighborhood that can afford rooms here. You people always think the rules don't apply to you, don't you? The guard, Kyle, straightened. Want me to call the cops? Naomi looked at him, her eyes steady. Do you call the cops on everyone who asks for tea, or just the ones who look like me? For a moment, even Becky went silent. The storm outside filled the space with the sound of rain against glass. Miguel shifted uneasily behind the counter. Becky cleared her throat. I'm going to have to ask you to leave, ma'am. Naomi didn't move. She walked to one of the leather chairs in the corner of the lobby and sat down, setting her bag beside her. The chair creaked softly. I'll wait, she said. For what? Becky asked, exasperated. For the manager, Naomi replied. The real one. Becky gave a short, nervous laugh. That's me, sweetheart. Naomi's voice was quiet but carried through the room. Not for long. Thunder cracked so loud the chandelier trembled. Miguel jumped slightly, and Becky muttered something under her breath, disappearing into the back office. The guard stayed near the door, arms crossed, pretending not to watch Naomi, but watching all the same. Naomi reached into her bag and pulled out her laptop. She opened it on her knees, the screen reflecting in her dark eyes. Her fingers moved slowly, deliberately, as if she were writing a note only she could understand. The lobby smelled of rain and disinfectant. The guests at the bar had gone back to their drinks, but every so often one of them turned to sneak another glance at the woman sitting alone, calm as stone, the storm's reflection dancing across her face. She looked at the clock again. 10:52. 6 minutes. She closed her laptop and whispered to herself, 6 minutes, Naomi. Just 6. In the kitchen behind her, a door creaked open, and a man's voice murmured, Becky, you sure you know what you're doing? I know exactly what I'm doing, she snapped. If she doesn't leave, we'll make her. Naomi's hand rested on her phone. Her thumb hovered over a single unsent message, one line that waited like a fuse. Thunder rolled again, and somewhere deep inside the hotel, the lights flickered once more. Outside, the ocean kept pounding the shore, as if echoing a promise she'd made long before she ever walked into this place, that respect isn't a favor, it's a right. The lobby settled into a hush that wasn't peace so much as a held breath. Rain scratched at the long panes of glass and the chandelier hummed faintly, steady now that the generator had caught. Naomi stayed in the leather chair, her bag tucked against her leg, her hands folded like a woman on a pew. She let the quiet work for her. Folks in places like this always got louder when you got quieter. She'd learned that a long time ago. The wall clock clicked the way old clocks do, a sound you only hear when you're waiting. 10:52 p.m. 6 minutes to the call. She rolled her shoulders once, as if to remind her body it still belonged to her. The denim of her jacket had dried in strange spots and left a salt ring, and the wet hem of her pants chilled her ankles. She thought of warm ginger tea, the heat of a cup held between two palms, the way it softened a hard night. She pictured it, set that comfort on a shelf in her mind, and kept still. From behind the front desk, Miguel reappeared without the towels, pretending to tidy a rack of brochures he didn't need to touch. He kept sneaking looks at Naomi like he was trying to place a face from years ago. He made a decision and came around the counter with a small stack of coasters in his hand, a prop to justify the walk. Ma'am, he said, keeping his voice low so it wouldn't carry to the back office. I don't mean to bother you. You're not, she said. This is going to sound weird, but my cousin reads all those business magazines. He keeps one on the coffee table, Fortune, I think. And there was a piece about a woman buying up coastal properties, fixing them up with local crews. The photo. He stopped himself, embarrassed by his own curiosity. Anyway, you just look familiar. Becky's heels snapped like castanets against tile as she came back from the office. Miguel, she said, without looking at him, you have the lobby inventory to finish. I finished it, he said. Then go polish silverware. or count the rugs, or rotate the brochures alphabetically. I don't care. But stop pestering our guest. There was a hitch before the last word, a little pause as if her mouth had to push it out. A couple drifted out of the bar. Tan skin, hair sprayed into place even on a storm night. The man with a golf tan line that cut his forehead in two. The woman in a silk blouse, the color of blush wine. He lifted his phone and held it the way people do when they pretend they aren't filming. Charleston content, he said to no one in particular. Crazy storm at a 5-star hotel. The woman glanced at Naomi and smiled a smile that wasn't kind. You think she's doing one of those social experiments? She whispered. Like pretending to be rich to see if they'll let her in? Maybe she's filming us, the man said, delighted with his own cleverness. He lowered his voice, but not enough. Hey, maybe it's Oprah in disguise. Naomi looked straight ahead and let their words pass over her the way sea foam passes over a rock. It touches, it hisses, and then it's gone. She had learned to let people exhaust themselves on the hardness of what she knew to be true. Old people used to say, don't let every dog that barks make you stop and turn. Kyle had moved closer to the door. He didn't say anything, but he tilted toward her the way a tree leans toward wind. There was the itchy air you can feel when a man thinks his uniform gives him permission. He crossed and uncrossed his arms, a restlessness that wanted a direction. Becky would give him one, Naomi thought. It's what women like Becky do. They borrow other people's force to make their small meanness bigger. The chandelier dimmed, brightened, then held steady. Somewhere a compressor kicked on. Becky set a clipboard down with a slap like a teacher who'd found a cheat sheet. All right, she said too brightly, smiling at Naomi from the far side of the counter. Here's what we're going to do. You're going to leave. Then, if you truly have a reservation, you can email our general inbox tomorrow, and someone during business hours will be happy to help. Her voice softened into false sweetness. But tonight isn't for complications. Naomi checked the clock again. 10:54 p.m., 4 minutes. She felt the shape of a choice she'd made long before. How long to wait, when to speak, what tone to take when the moment finally arrived. She found her father in that empty space, the way his voice used to come through a radio he'd fix on Saturday afternoons, thin at first and then full once the tuner found the station. He'd told her once on a day when a bank manager made her stand in a separate line for large deposits that some folks need you to break their rules just to see they were never rules, only habits. Break 'em gently, he'd said, but break 'em all the same. Miguel was still standing there, pretending to arrange coasters into a neat fan. There's a storm policy, he whispered. Any guest who's checked in can request beverages from the cafe even if it's closed. The line item is courtesy service during inclement weather. He swallowed. I could get you the tea. Becky's head snapped toward him, as if she had a sixth sense for compassion. You could not, she said. If I see a cup near that woman, I'll write you up for stealing inventory. Do you understand me? Miguel flushed the painful red of a young man who hates a job but needs it. Yes, ma'am. He slid the coasters into a perfect stack and walked back behind the desk, hands clenched. He didn't quite meet Naomi's eyes, ashamed on her behalf and his. From the kitchen door, a quiet face watched the lobby, the kind of face you remember only later when the pieces fall into place. A man in a white chef's coat, edges softened by steam and years, eyes taking in more than they gave away. The door swung closed. Naomi didn't move her head, but she felt that gaze like the first warm patch of sun after rain. Two teens rushed in from the storm and shook themselves like dogs, their hoodies leaving dark patches on the tile. Whoa, one said, spotting the scene. What's going on? Nothing, Becky snapped. Everything's fine. The teen laughed. Everything's never fine when somebody says everything's fine. The bar's TV flipped from weather radar to a local news anchor with perfect hair and an earnest tone. Coastal businesses brace for outages, she said. Some hotels are reporting reservation system glitches. The ticker scrolled in red. Becky reached for the remote and turned the volume down until the anchor's mouth moved without sound. Naomi set her phone on her thigh, opened the messaging app, and read the single line waiting at the bottom. Ready on your mark. She didn't send it. Not yet. The thing about marks is you don't announce them. You feel them. when a room hits that strange point where even the cruel begin to anticipate their own humiliation. "Ma'am," Kyle said, stepping forward one more pace as if the floor itself nudged him, "we really don't want trouble tonight." "Then don't make any," Naomi said, and her tone was so gentle he looked confused, as if he'd misheard. The couple from the bar had moved closer, emboldened by the shape of their audience. The woman swiped her phone with her thumb. "We should go live," she said, thrilled the way people get when ugliness promises them likes. "People eat this up." "Not in my lobby," Becky said, but the woman only smirked in that tourist way. How rules apply to everyone but them. "Becky," Miguel tried again, "maybe we could just—" "What we could do," Becky cut in, "is not lose our jobs because a stranger fakes a booking at 11 at night." Naomi lifted her eyes to meet Becky's. "You afraid of losing your job?" "I'm afraid of grifters," Becky said, "and I'm tired of being made the villain because I do my job." Naomi almost smiled at the irony, but it was a soft ache more than a smile. "Doing your job," she said. "Is that what you call this?" Becky's mouth tightened. "I know the type. There's a look. There's always a look." "What look is that?" Naomi asked. Becky hesitated, then let the ugliness show because she thought the room would back her. "The look of someone who wants a free ride," she said, "who thinks the rules are for other people, who thinks if they make a scene, they'll get what they want." Naomi turned her gaze to the window, to the black Atlantic and its white teeth. The clock ticked. 10:56 p.m. The seconds slid by like beads on a string. She didn't bother to tell Becky that some people didn't need to make a scene to get what they were owed. Some people only had to stand still long enough for the truth to find them. The kitchen door opened again, and the man in the chef's coat stepped halfway into the lobby, as if testing how far he could go without permission. His eyes moved from Naomi to Miguel to Becky, then back to Naomi. He seemed to make a private decision and disappeared once more. The door swung on its hinge, a metronome to a song only he could hear. A new gust of rain hit the glass and ran downward in sheets. The teens pressed their noses to the window, delighted by nature's power because they'd never yet had to pay for it. The man from the bar cleared his throat, angling his phone for a better shot. Becky straightened the pile of forms on her clipboard into a perfect stack that said order, while her face said panic. Naomi breathed, slow and even. She thought of a church fan moving through humid air and of her mother's hands, square and sure, folding laundry in an old shotgun house when bills were due and hope was thin. "Baby," her mother would say, "you can't stop people from looking down on you, but you can make them look up." 10:57 p.m. The minute hand kissed a mark and moved on. Naomi reached for her phone again and typed, "Stand by." She didn't send it. There was still a lesson to be finished here, and lessons have their own clocks. Miguel took a step forward. "Ma'am," he stumbled, catching himself before a name he didn't have. "There is a storm accommodation guideline. I can print it." "Print whatever you like," Becky said. "It won't change a thing." Naomi looked at Miguel. "Thank you," she said, and let the gratitude settle on him like a coat. He straightened almost imperceptibly, and it made her think of all the young men she'd hired who only needed one adult to look them in the eye and say they weren't crazy. Kyle shifted again. "Last chance," he muttered, as if the words were for him more than her. "Please don't make this worse." Naomi stood. The chair exhaled. She smoothed the front of her jacket and picked up her bag. For a second, the room sighed in relief, believing it had won, like a bully who sees a smaller kid step back from a swing. She walked to the counter. Miguel stepped aside so quickly you'd think he was making room for a parade. Becky leaned in, certain now. "Finally coming to your senses?" Naomi set her phone on the marble between them. The storm's reflection flickered in the black glass like lightning caught in a well. She said very softly, "I am." Becky smiled, victorious and small. "Good, because we don't serve people like—" Naomi raised one hand, not high, not sharp, just enough for Becky to feel the air change. "Are you sure?" Naomi asked. "You want to finish that sentence?" The words were not loud. They didn't need to be. They settled into the lobby's bones, into the chandelier and the polished floor, and the breath that every person in that room was suddenly holding. Even the rain seemed to pause, listening at the glass. 10:58 p.m. 2 minutes. Naomi looked into Becky's eyes and saw what always shows up at the end of meanness, the first flicker of doubt. The golfer's phone lowered an inch. The teens turned from the storm back to the woman who stood as if she had waited her whole life for this particular minute. Naomi's thumb hovered over the message one last time. Ready on your mark. Her father's voice again, the old radio now tuned strong and clear. Baby, sometimes the quiet right before thunder is the only warning folks get. She pressed send. The kitchen was alive with the muffled hum of a storm that no wall could quite keep out. Water hissed through gutters, thunder rumbled like a freight train far away, and the air smelled of lemons and old fryer oil. Mr. Thompson stood at the prep table, wiping his hands on a white towel that had long ago given up being white. He'd been at Haven Shore for 21 years, through 4 owners and 6 remodels, long enough to know when something in the air wasn't just thunder. He had felt it the moment he'd stepped out to the lobby and seen her, the woman sitting calm as Sunday morning while the night manager tried to make her small. He didn't say anything right away. A man learns the cost of speaking too soon when the people above him don't care for what his words might cost them. But her face had stopped him. He knew he'd seen it before, maybe in an email from corporate, some glossy newsletter with a headline about new leadership and vision for the future. He remembered his daughter showing him that very article on her phone. See, Daddy? A black woman running things, she'd said. He hadn't believed it'd ever touch his world. But now she was right there in his lobby, getting treated like a trespasser. He reached for the clipboard that held the night's prep sheet, trying to look busy as Becky stomped through the swinging door behind him. What's taking so long with those desserts? She snapped, not even looking his way. You act like the world's ending because of a little rain. Thompson kept his tone mild. Storms got the system lagging. Half the orders didn't print. Excuses, Becky said, brushing raindrops from her sleeves. We have a reputation to maintain. Reputation, he murmured, just loud enough for himself. He wiped the counter again, though it was already clean. Seems like we're doing a fine job building one right now. Becky turned, hearing the edge under his breath. What's that supposed to mean? He looked up at her, tired eyes steady. That woman out there, he said. She's a guest, ain't she? She's a problem, Becky corrected. You stay out of it, Thompson. Last thing we need is you making this worse. He set the towel down slowly. You think me treating somebody decent is going to make it worse? Becky blinked, thrown off by his calm. You don't know who she is or what she's trying to pull. He let out a small, weary laugh. Maybe you don't know who she is. And before she could answer, he pushed through the door back into the lobby. The moment he stepped out, the air felt different. The hum of the lights, the static of the storm, the way people's voices seemed to lower around her, it all carried a charge. Naomi looked up as he approached, her expression unreadable but polite. Evening, ma'am, he said, the southern weight in his words turning gentle. You all right out here? Becky's voice sliced in before Naomi could answer. Thompson back to the kitchen. He ignored her. Just making sure no one's being mistreated, he said. Storm night, folks, get edgy. I said back to the kitchen, Becky repeated, her face tightening. We don't need staff interfering. Naomi studied him. You've been here a long time, haven't you? She asked softly. He nodded once. Long enough. Becky crossed her arms. Mr. Thompson's our head chef, she said, her tone dripping with that brand of condescension that made the title sound like kitchen help. He handles food, not guests. Thompson turned to her, and for the first time in years, there was steel in his voice. Ma'am, every guest who eats in this hotel passes through my kitchen, so don't tell me who I do and don't handle. A few of the guests near the bar stopped pretending not to listen. Becky felt the eyes on her and her cheeks flushed red. If you want to keep your job, you'll remember your place, she hissed. Naomi's voice cut through the room like quiet thunder. He seems to remember it just fine. It's the rest of you who forgot yours. The lobby went still. Even the storm seemed to pause, as if listening for what would come next. Becky opened her mouth, but whatever words she had dissolved, she gestured to Kyle. Get him back to the kitchen. Now. The guard hesitated. He wasn't paid enough to manhandle a man twice his age. He's just talking, Kyle muttered. Then you're useless too, Becky snapped. Do I have to do everything myself? Miguel had crept closer to the front desk again, his face pale. Maybe we should all just cool down, he said. It's late, people are stressed, and... Shut up, Miguel, Becky barked. God, do they hire anyone these days? Naomi rose from her chair. She wasn't tall, but she carried height like an aura. Tell me, she said quietly, does talking to your staff like that make you feel important, Becky? Becky blinked. Excuse me? Because from where I'm standing, Naomi continued, it just makes you smaller. A nervous laugh rippled from the couple by the bar. They wanted drama. They got it. Phones came up again, little red dots glowing in the dim light. The smell of the sea mixed with the ozone of electronics heating under thumbs. The world outside was dark, but the story inside was about to find an audience. Becky's face went cold. Security, she said, turning to Kyle. I want her out of here now. Before he could move, Thompson cleared his throat. Maybe you ought to slow down and think, he said. If I'm not mistaken, I saw her picture on a memo from corporate a while back. Something about new ownership. Becky's head whipped toward him. What? Naomi met his eyes. There was something there, a flicker of understanding, an unspoken question. You know, don't you? Thompson gave the smallest nod. She smiled, just enough to say she appreciated his memory. Becky scoffed. Corporate doesn't look like her. Thompson's gaze sharpened. Then maybe that's why we're in the mess we're in. The bartender made a low whistle. Lord, he muttered, this is better than cable. Naomi turned to Thompson. Thank you, she said, her voice soft but certain. You've done enough for now. He hesitated. You sure, ma'am? I'm sure. She could see the worry in his eyes. Decades of knowing how these stories usually ended. Men like him got fired for less than speaking a truth out loud. But she also saw his pride, that quiet defiance that had carried him through every year of being overlooked. She nodded once, a promise she couldn't voice yet. Thompson backed away, giving Becky a long, steady look before he disappeared through the kitchen door again. The room felt colder without him. Naomi turned back to Becky, whose confidence had started to crumble around the edges. You done making a spectacle? Becky demanded. Because if not, I can call the police right now. Naomi tilted her head. You think the police will make you right? I think they'll remove a trespasser. Naomi's lips curved, just barely. Then by all means, make the call. But before you do, you should probably check your company handbook, section 14.3. Becky blinked. What are you talking about? Naomi's eyes didn't waver. It's about discrimination. You might find it relevant. The words hung there, heavy and strange, like a curtain about to drop. Becky looked uncertain for the first time. She turned toward the computer, fingers flying over the keyboard as if she could hide behind the motion. The system flickered under her touch, the storm outside pressing against the glass like an audience that refused to leave. Miguel swallowed hard. Becky, he said, you might want to. She cut him off again, but her voice lacked its usual sharpness. Don't tell me what I need to do. Naomi stepped back toward her chair, calm as ever. She could feel Thompson's eyes on her even through the kitchen wall, could feel the questions rippling under the surface of every conversation in that room. Her phone buzzed once in her pocket. A single message, standing by. She didn't reply yet. Timing was everything. The clock ticked to 10:59, 1 minute to midnight on a very long day. From the kitchen came the faint sound of a gospel hum, low, steady, the kind of tune a man sings when he's seen too much wrong to believe in silence. Naomi closed her eyes for half a second, let that sound anchor her. The storm, the humiliation, the waiting, it would all be worth it if the next minute landed right. Becky's voice cracked the silence. Fine. If you won't leave, security will handle it. Naomi opened her eyes, her calm so absolute it frightened everyone watching. All right, she said softly. Let's see how that goes. Thunder rolled again, close now, shaking the glass. Somewhere in the dark behind the clouds, the first light of justice was beginning to form. The storm outside had turned mean. Rain slammed against the window so hard it sounded like handfuls of gravel. A flash of lightning lit up the lobby, bleaching every face for an instant before the lights blinked twice and went out. For a heartbeat, the whole hotel was swallowed in darkness. Then the generator coughed itself awake, sputtering light across the marble floor. Becky cursed under her breath, clutching the counter as if the flicker had insulted her personally. Kyle's radio crackled with static. Power's unstable. A voice said from the other end, "The system's down again." The computers on the desk went black, their screens reflecting the candles flickering from the bar. Becky slammed her clipboard down. "Great, just great. Now the system's down, and we've got her still sitting here pretending to be a guest." Naomi stayed where she was, her posture composed but her eyes sharp, taking in every face, every flinch. Her patience had the shape of steel beneath silk. She reached for her phone, glancing at the dim reflection of the chandelier above. 10:59 p.m., almost time. Becky turned toward Kyle. "Escort her out. I've had it." Kyle hesitated. "Ma'am, the weather's rough out there. Streets are flooding. Maybe wait till the power stabilizes." "I don't care if it's a hurricane," Becky snapped. "She's not staying here another minute." Miguel stepped forward, his young voice trembling but steadying as he spoke. "Miss Harris, the policy says no guest should be asked to leave during severe weather warnings. It's a liability issue." Becky spun on him, her face a sharp blade of contempt. "Do I look like I care about policy? I said get her out." The guard sighed and started toward Naomi. He didn't look angry, just tired. The kind of tired that lives behind the eyes of a man who's followed too many bad orders. Naomi rose slowly, her movements quiet but deliberate, like a tide pulling back before it strikes the shore. Her wet jacket caught the light, the faint sheen making her look taller somehow. Kyle reached out his hand, not to grab, but to gesture toward the door. "Ma'am, I don't want trouble. Let's just—" Naomi's voice stopped him. "Are you sure you want to finish that sentence?" The air between them tightened. Even Becky froze, her mouth half open. There was something in Naomi's tone, soft but carrying weight, the kind of voice that doesn't need to rise to be heard. Miguel looked from one to the other, his breath caught. "I'm just doing my job," Kyle muttered, his hand lowering. "No," Naomi said. "You're doing hers." She nodded toward Becky. "And you might want to ask yourself if her job is worth losing yours for." Thunder cracked again, shaking the chandeliers. A glass fell somewhere behind the bar and shattered. The couple who had been filming earlier gasped, but neither stopped recording. The lobby felt like a stage, every person frozen in their role, every sound magnified by tension. Becky found her voice again. "I don't know who you think you are, but you don't threaten my staff." "I haven't threatened anyone," Naomi said calmly. "You're the one calling for force on a paying guest." "You're not a guest," Becky snapped. "You're a liar." Naomi tilted her head slightly, studying her. "And what exactly makes you so sure of that?" Becky hesitated, searching for words that would sound professional, but only finding the ones she really meant. "Look at you," she blurted out. "You're wearing that. You don't belong here. No one who belongs here looks like—" Lightning flashed again, washing the color from Becky's face before she could finish. The words hung there, half-born, poisonous and unmistakable. Even Kyle winced. Miguel turned away, ashamed. Naomi's voice was barely above a whisper. "Finish it." Becky blinked. "What?" "Finish what you were going to say," Naomi repeated. "Say it all the way." Becky's throat moved, but no sound came. She looked around for someone to back her up, but all the witnesses had fallen silent. The man at the bar stopped pretending to sip his drink. The teenagers by the window set their phones down. Even the storm outside seemed to pause, waiting. Naomi stepped closer, her presence filling the space that fear had emptied. "You've already said enough," she murmured, "and yet not nearly enough to understand what you just did." Miguel whispered, "Miss Harris, maybe just let her." "Don't," Becky hissed. "She's trying to manipulate us." Naomi turned to him. "No, I'm trying to remind you both that people are watching." She gestured toward the phones pointed at them, "and they're recording every word." Becky's face blanched as she noticed the little red lights from half a dozen screens. "Delete that," she barked at the guests. "Right now." "Freedom of information, sweetheart," the woman from the bar said, smirking. "If you don't want to be seen, don't be seen doing this." Becky's eyes flashed. "Security." Kyle didn't move. "No, ma'am," he said quietly. "Not this time." Becky spun on him. "Excuse me?" "I said no," he repeated, louder now. "I've thrown out drunks, thieves, people swinging punches, but I'm not throwing out a woman who hasn't done a damn thing wrong." The words landed heavy. Miguel let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Becky's mouth opened and closed, lost for once. Naomi gave Kyle a small nod. "Good choice," she said. Another rumble of thunder rolled through, closer than before. The power flickered again, plunging the lobby into a dim orange glow from the emergency lights. Naomi's reflection shimmered faintly in the marble counter. She looked at Becky, and her voice softened into something colder than anger. You know, the lights have a way of showing what people try to hide. You should see your face right now. Becky steadied herself on the counter. You don't scare me. I'm not trying to, Naomi said. Fear doesn't change people. Accountability does. The kitchen door opened just then, and Thompson stepped out again, wiping his hands on his apron. What's going on out here? He asked. Becky turned on him. Didn't I tell you to stay in the kitchen? He looked from her to Naomi, then to the phone still raised. Looks like the kitchen came out here instead, he said quietly. Naomi gave him a small nod, and something unspoken passed between them. Trust, recognition, maybe both. Becky saw it too and misread it as conspiracy. That's it, she said. You're both finished. Thompson, pack your knives. You're done here. Thompson shook his head slowly. After tonight, ma'am, I don't think you'll be the one doing the firing. The guests gasped softly. The air in the lobby felt charged, thick as the seconds before lightning hits ground. Naomi could sense the turn coming, the moment every story lives for, the hinge between humiliation and reckoning. She looked up at the clock. 11 p.m. exactly. A gust of wind rattled the front doors and the lobby lights flared to full brightness as if the storm itself had taken a breath. On the computer screen behind the desk, text began scrolling, a reboot notification from the hotel's internal system. Miguel stepped forward, squinting. Miss Harris, look. Emails populated across the monitor in rapid sequence. One subject line flashed across the top. Urgent, CEO visit, Charleston branch, 11 p.m. Becky's eyes darted to Naomi, then back to the screen. What is this? Naomi's calm smile was the first true movement she'd made in half an hour. It's what happens when the power comes back on, she said. The color drained from Becky's face. Thompson folded his arms, a low whistle escaping through his teeth. Kyle looked like a man who just realized he'd been standing on the wrong side of a door that was about to lock. Naomi picked up her bag, the motion fluid and unhurried. Now, she said softly, shall we begin? The thunder outside gave one last crack that shook the whole building, as if the heavens themselves were answering her. The storm outside had quieted into that uneasy stillness that follows destruction. The rain no longer pounded, it whispered, tapping slow fingers against the glass like someone asking to be let in. Inside the Haven Shore lobby, time itself seemed to hesitate. The computer monitor behind the counter blinked awake, its blue glow spilling over Becky's frozen face. Her mouth hung open as she read the subject line again and again, as if staring long enough might make it disappear. Urgent, CEO visit, Charleston branch, 11 p.m. Naomi didn't move. She stood in front of the counter, one hand resting lightly on the edge, her phone still glowing faintly beside her. Her calm was almost unnatural, the kind that unnerved everyone who didn't understand what power looks like when it doesn't need to raise its voice. Miguel's eyes flicked between her and the screen, his lips parted. Becky was muttering to herself, nonsense fragments, excuses forming in real time. It's just an internal memo, she stammered finally, forcing a shaky laugh. Corporate sends those to every branch, probably some training alert or... Then open it, Naomi said quietly. Becky froze. Go on, Naomi added, her tone as polite as it was terrifying. You seem so confident about policy. Let's make sure you're right. The young couple at the bar crept closer. Their phones were still recording, small red dots reflecting in the polished marble. Lydia Tran, the travel vlogger who'd been live streaming her night from the bar, angled her camera discreetly toward the counter. Her viewers were already flooding her chat with comments. This is getting wild. Who is this woman? Don't stop filming. Becky's fingers hovered over the keyboard. She tried to fake a laugh again, but it sounded dry and hollow. The system's still unstable, she said, tapping random keys. I shouldn't. Naomi leaned in just enough that their faces were caught in the same pale light of the screen. You've spent the past half hour telling everyone what you should and shouldn't do. Now I'm telling you. Open the email. The hush in the lobby was thick enough to feel. Kyle shifted uneasily by the doors, and Thompson, standing half in the kitchen doorway, folded his arms, watching. Becky clicked. The message filled the screen, its subject bold, official, and impossible to misread. Confidential. CEO Naomi Carter will arrive tonight to conduct on-site evaluation. All staff are to comply fully with the audit procedures. Failure to adhere may result in immediate disciplinary review. Becky's face went white. For a long, suspended moment, she just stared. Then slowly she turned toward Naomi. This isn't, you can't be. Naomi's gaze didn't waver. Can't be what? She asked softly. Becky's voice cracked. You can't be the CEO. Because I don't look like one? The question hung in the air, landing heavier than thunder. Miguel closed his eyes, as if bracing for impact. Thompson exhaled through his nose, a low, satisfied sound. Naomi reached into her leather bag and took out a slim folder. Inside was a single laminated ID card, clipped to a black ribbon. She placed it on the counter in front of Becky. Naomi L. Carter, Chief Executive Officer, Carter & Co. Hospitality Group. The photo was recent. Same bun, same jacket, the same quiet eyes that had watched Becky humiliate her. Kyle muttered, "Oh, hell." Someone gasped near the bar. Lydia's live stream comment section exploded so fast it looked like static. She owns the place. Oh my God. The manager's done for. This is a movie. Becky's knees seemed to give. She reached for the counter as if it could hold her up. This must be some kind of trick. You can't just walk in here pretending. I didn't pretend, Naomi said. I booked a room. Same as any guest. I followed the rules. You're the one who decided they didn't apply to me. The lights flickered again, and the faint hum of the generator filled the silence between words. Becky opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Her breath trembled in her chest. Naomi turned to Miguel. What time is it? He checked his watch. 11:03, ma'am. Good. Then let's document this properly. Lydia lowered her phone for a second. Ma'am, I'm live on. Keep filming, Naomi said without looking at her. Transparency seems to be the only policy that still works around here. Becky's lips parted again, but Naomi was already moving. She walked around the counter, her heels echoing softly against the marble, every step measured and unhurried. She stopped in front of the monitor, pulled up the internal chat feed, and typed in her credentials. The system accepted them instantly. The header changed to Administrator Access, Naomi Carter. The crowd watching let out a collective murmur, the sound a mix of awe and disbelief. Becky backed up until she hit the wall. I didn't know, she whispered. If I'd known. Naomi looked at her, and there was sadness in her expression, not triumph. You'd have treated me differently. That's the problem. She turned the screen toward the crowd. The corporate dashboard lit up with real-time data, staff performance metrics, complaint histories, disciplinary records. Every branch in this company is under review, she said. But this one was already on my list. 27 verified discrimination complaints in the last 6 months. I came to see why. Miguel's mouth fell open. You came like this, without telling anyone? Naomi nodded. People behave differently when they think no one's watching. I prefer to see the truth. Thompson let out a low chuckle from the back. Well, you picked the right night, ma'am. Naomi gave him a small nod, then looked back at Becky. You called the police on your own employer. You humiliated a guest who followed every rule, and you did it with the full confidence of someone who's never once been held accountable. Becky tried to speak, but her voice came out a ragged whisper. Please, I was just doing my job. No, Naomi said, her voice soft but final. You were doing what you've always done, using the rules to cover your bias. Lydia's phone was still rolling. The comment counter had passed 20,000 viewers. Somewhere in the distance, sirens wailed faintly, then faded away. Naomi picked up her phone again and opened her messages. Activate audit, she typed, then sent it. A few seconds later, her device pinged with confirmation. Every action taken tonight has been recorded, she said calmly. This entire incident will be submitted to our board and to the State Civil Rights Commission. Miguel swallowed. Ma'am, should I shut the lobby down? No, Naomi said. Let everyone see how accountability begins. Becky's shoulders shook. Please, she said again, I didn't mean. Naomi held up a hand. Stop. Intentions don't erase outcomes. What you meant doesn't matter. What you did does. Thompson came forward, his face solemn but steady. Ma'am, he said quietly, what do you need from me? Naomi's expression softened. Stay right where you are. You did what you could. She looked around the room, her gaze sweeping over each person who had watched and stayed silent. The rest of you, keep your phones on. Keep recording. You've already witnessed the problem. Now you'll see what happens next." The storm outside gave a deep, distant growl as if agreeing with her. The emergency lights reflected off the glass doors, casting her silhouette across the lobby floor. She turned back to Becky one last time. "You wanted to know who I am," Naomi said. "Now you do." And with that, she picked up the phone from the counter and dialed a number from memory. "This is Carter," she said. "Yes, Charleston branch. I need an immediate compliance review and staff suspension notice for the entire night shift, effective now." Becky let out a tiny sob, clutching the counter. Naomi didn't look at her. She stared straight ahead, her reflection shimmering in the window beside the rain. Her voice remained calm, unshaken. "Yes," she said into the phone. "They're all here, and yes, I'll handle the explanation myself." When she hung up, the room was silent again. Outside, the rain picked up gentle this time, like applause. The lobby had turned into a cathedral of silence. Every sound, the rain, the hum of the generator, the faint clinking of glasses from the bar, seemed to orbit around Naomi Carter as she stood in front of the counter. The screen behind her still glowed with her name and title, the company logo stamped like a seal above it. Becky stood frozen, her eyes wide and unfocused, as if she'd been turned to stone. Miguel was the first to breathe again. "Oh my God," he whispered, almost reverently. "She's really the boss." The words rippled through the room, passing from mouth to mouth. Someone near the elevator gasped. The older couple who'd been whispering earlier now stared at Naomi with the strange reverence people reserve for royalty or ghosts. Lydia's phone was still pointed at the scene, and her live stream had crossed 50,000 viewers. Comments scrolled so fast they blurred into white noise, shock, awe, vindication, disbelief. Naomi didn't seem to notice any of it. She turned slightly, her reflection sliding along the marble floor, and faced Becky. "Tell me, Miss Harris," she said, her voice so calm it made the room lean in to hear it. "When you crushed my card under your shoe earlier, what were you protecting?" Becky blinked, the words struggling through the fog of panic. I was protecting the hotel, ma'am. We've had scams before, people using fake credentials. And fake?" Naomi's eyebrows lifted. "You thought I was fake." Becky nodded weakly. "You have to understand, you didn't look." "Didn't look what?" Naomi asked, and the question landed heavy and deliberate. "Didn't look rich? Didn't look white? Didn't look like someone who belonged in your lobby?" Becky's throat worked. "I didn't mean." Naomi stepped closer, and her tone softened in a way that somehow felt sharper. "You never do." The line struck like a bell. Even the air seemed to vibrate with its echo. Kyle shifted his stance, uncomfortable. Thompson stood near the doorway, arms crossed, watching the scene unfold like a man seeing something he'd been waiting half his life to witness. Becky's mouth trembled. "Please, Miss Carter, I was doing my job." Naomi tilted her head. "Your job?" She turned to Miguel. "Tell me, Miguel, what would you say her job was tonight?" Miguel hesitated. He looked down, then back at Naomi, his voice quiet. "She embarrassed you in front of everyone. She told me not to help. She told security to throw you out. That's not hospitality." Naomi nodded slowly. "That's the truth of it." She looked back at Becky. "Your job was to represent this brand, to make people feel welcome, safe, respected. Instead, you decided who was worthy of those things and who wasn't. You turned my hotel into a stage for your prejudice." Becky's hands clenched at her sides. "It's not like that," she said desperately. "I didn't know who you were." Naomi's expression didn't change. "You shouldn't have needed to." A murmur swept through the watching guests. The man from the bar whispered to his date, "Damn, she's right." Naomi let the silence expand again. She turned back to the computer and began typing. The keystroke sounded louder than thunder. On the monitor, an official document appeared, a staff suspension notice. Becky watched, her face draining of color with each word Naomi typed. Lydia, still streaming, whispered to her camera, "Y'all, she's firing her on the spot." The comments went wild. "Good for her." "This is justice." "She's so calm it's terrifying." Naomi printed the document and placed it on the counter. "You can sign it now, or I can finalize it through HR in the morning," she said. "Either way, your employment here ends tonight." Becky shook her head violently, tears springing to her eyes. "Please, Miss Carter, I've worked here 8 years. I have a mortgage. I didn't mean any harm." Naomi's eyes softened for just a second, but her voice didn't waver. "I know what it's like to work hard and still be dismissed. But understanding doesn't mean exemption. You don't get to insult people and hide behind excuses. She turned slightly, addressing the room now. Every guest who walks through those doors deserves dignity. That's not a slogan. It's the foundation of this company. And tonight, that foundation was cracked in front of an audience of tens of thousands. Her phone buzzed. She glanced down at the screen, a message from her assistant. Corporate board is online awaiting your update. She looked back at Becky, then at Miguel. We're going to make this right, she said. But not just for show, for good. Miguel swallowed. How do we start? Naomi smiled faintly, the first real smile she'd shown all night. By telling the truth. She tapped the call button on her phone, and the line connected to the boardroom half a world away. Voices came through the speaker, muffled, formal, expectant. Miss Carter, one said, we're watching the feed from security. Can you confirm the situation? Naomi raised the phone slightly, her eyes sweeping over the room. Yes, she said. You're seeing exactly what I wanted you to see. A first-hand example of what our brand has become when respect is left out of the business model. Becky's sob broke through the hush. Please, she whispered, I can't lose this job. Naomi's tone gentled again, but it held no compromise. You lost it when you forgot your humanity. The board member's voice crackled through the line again. What action do you recommend? I'm enacting a full compliance audit, Naomi said. Effective immediately. All staff on duty tonight are suspended pending review. Security footage and live stream evidence are being collected. Understood. Naomi ended the call and turned back to the lobby. Her gaze found Thompson first. Mr. Thompson, she said, you saw everything. You spoke up when others didn't. I'll need your help tomorrow. He nodded, his voice low but steady. Yes, ma'am. Anything you need. Becky took a trembling step forward. Miss Carter, Naomi, please, if you'll just give me another chance. Naomi's voice was almost kind. Becky, I'm not angry. I don't have to be. What you did speaks for itself. She gestured toward the phone still recording. You've made yourself a lesson. The only question now is whether you'll learn from it. The manager's tears slipped down her face, streaking her foundation. I didn't mean it, she said again, her voice cracking. I just thought. Naomi interrupted softly. You thought wrong. She turned to Miguel. You'll help me draft the official report tonight. After that, you go home. You've earned your place here. Miguel nodded, his throat too tight for words. Naomi picked up the signed suspension notice, folded it neatly, and slid it into her folder. The weight of the paper felt heavier than it should have. She looked up one last time at the staff, the guests, the glowing cameras. This is what accountability looks like, she said. It's not loud. It's not cruel. It's just the truth, finally spoken out loud. Outside, lightning flashed again, but this time it didn't feel threatening. It felt cleansing. The wind had shifted, and the rain was easing into a steady rhythm. Naomi stood still for a long moment, letting the quiet return, letting the power of the night settle into its new shape. Then she said, almost to herself, now that we've ended the lie, it's time to begin the work. No one moved as she walked away from the counter. Every step she took left a soft echo on the marble floor, a sound that seemed to carry the weight of change itself. The rain had slowed to a whisper, but inside the Haven Shore lobby, the storm had just begun. Naomi stood in the center of the marble floor, the faint hum of the generator steady beneath the sound of breathing, shallow, uneven, and everywhere. She could feel every gaze in the room on her, the frightened ones, the guilty ones, the curious, and the hungry for spectacle. Becky had sunk into a chair behind the counter, pale and trembling, mascara streaking down her cheeks. Kyle leaned against the wall, looking like he'd rather melt into it than face what was coming. Miguel hovered near the edge of the desk, uncertain if he was still part of the staff or just a witness now. Thompson, quiet as a mountain, stood near the entrance to the kitchen, his arms folded, his face unreadable. Naomi reached into her bag and pulled out a sleek black folder, its edges crisp, the kind of object that belonged to boardrooms, not lobbies. She set it on the counter with a soft thud that carried the weight of finality. I'd like everyone's attention, she said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried easily, the way thunder does when it's far away but closing in. This hotel, she continued, has failed the most basic test of decency tonight, and I intend to make sure this failure is recorded in every detail. Lydia was still filming. Her live stream had ballooned past 80,000 viewers. The red light of her phone reflected on Naomi's face, casting a faint glow against her calm expression. Naomi didn't mind. In fact, she wanted the world to see. "What you've witnessed tonight," she said, turning slightly toward the camera, "isn't an isolated mistake. It's the result of a culture that rewards arrogance and excuses cruelty. But I believe in second chances, earned ones." She opened the folder and slid out several printed pages. Employee reports, complaint summaries, performance audits. Becky looked at them as if they were execution papers. Naomi held one up, the company letterhead gleaming beneath the chandelier's dim light. "This report," she said, "details 27 verified complaints against your night management team. 8 involved racial bias. 5 were formally investigated but closed with insufficient evidence. 17 were ignored." She looked directly at Becky. "You closed 8 of them yourself." Becky shook her head, her voice shaking. "Those weren't my decisions. Corporate sets those parameters. I was just following." Naomi cut her off gently. "You were following comfort, not policy. You chose silence because it was easier than change." Becky's lips parted as if to respond, but the words wouldn't come. The couple at the bar watched with wide eyes. Lydia's audience poured hearts and fire emojis across the screen. Someone whispered, "She's really doing it." Naomi turned the next page. "Mr. Ms. Kyle Benson, head of security," she said. "You've been with this hotel 3 years. 13 guest complaints under your supervision. Excessive force, verbal harassment, selective enforcement." Kyle looked away, his jaw tight. "I was doing what I was told," he muttered. "I'm sure you were," Naomi said. "The problem is who you decided was worth protecting." Kyle opened his mouth, but Naomi held up a hand. "Not tonight. You'll have the chance to speak in your exit interview." He closed his eyes. A long sigh slipped out of him. Naomi's gaze moved to Thompson. "And you, Mr. Thompson," she said, her tone softening. "You've worked here longer than any of them. You spoke up tonight when others stayed quiet. You recognized me when it mattered least, but said nothing that would have protected yourself at the cost of the truth. For that, I thank you." Thompson inclined his head, his deep voice low. "Just did what's right, ma'am." "You did more than that," Naomi said. "You reminded this place what right still looks like." She set the reports aside and drew a slow breath, letting the weight of the room settle again. Her eyes drifted to the big clock on the wall. Midnight had passed. The rain had stopped. Outside, the first hints of moonlight were cutting through clouds, spilling across the wet pavement. Inside, the tension clung like humidity after a storm. "Now," Naomi said, "we're going to deal with the matter of employment." She picked up a pen from the counter and clicked it once, the sound sharp as a gun being cocked. "Each of you will have 3 options." Becky looked up, her voice barely a whisper. "3 options?" Naomi nodded. 1, you can resign immediately, quietly, with a neutral reference. 2, you can be terminated for cause, which will appear in your employment record permanently. Or 3, you can request a full investigation. That process will take months and will make your names part of every public record, every article, every headline attached to this case. Choose carefully. The air went still again. Becky's breath came fast. "You can't do this tonight," she said. "You can't just—" Naomi's eyes held her in place. "I already did." Becky's hands began to tremble. "Please, Miss Carter, I'll do anything. I'll take training. I'll work double shifts. Just don't." "Stop," Naomi said softly. "You're not the victim here." She looked toward Kyle. "Your choice?" He hesitated, then looked at Becky, then at Thompson, then finally down at his hands. "Resign," he said quietly. "I got kids. I'll take the neutral record." Naomi nodded. "That's wise." She signed one of the papers, slid it across the counter, and set the pen down. "But sign here." He signed quickly, his shoulders slumping as if the ink itself had drained his strength. Naomi turned back to Becky. "And you?" Becky was crying openly now, but there was still a stubborn pride in her eyes, the kind that resists even its own collapse. "If I resign," she whispered, "I'll lose my severance." Naomi regarded her for a long moment. "Then you can choose option 3. Becky flinched. "No, I'll—" She swallowed hard. "I'll resign." Her signature came out shaky, the letters uneven, her name looking more like a confession than a word. Naomi watched her finish, then gathered the papers. "You've both made your choices. The rest of the staff will be notified by corporate before sunrise." Thompson stepped forward, his eyes soft with both respect and sorrow. "Ma'am," he said, "you sure you want to handle this all alone tonight?" Naomi looked at him, and for the first time fatigue crept into her features. "No," she said quietly, "but it's mine to handle." Miguel took a hesitant step toward her. "Ma'am, if there's anything I can do—" "You already did," Naomi said. "You tried to help when you didn't have to. That matters more than you know." Lydia lowered her phone at last, the red recording light fading. "Miss Carter," she said carefully, "would you like me to end the stream?" And shook her head. "Keep it up. Let people see the whole thing. Let them see what accountability looks like when it isn't dressed up for PR." Becky made a small sound, half sob, half disbelief. "You're ruining my life," she whispered. Naomi met her eyes one last time. "No," she said softly. "You did that long before I walked through your door." The words landed with quiet precision. No cruelty, no satisfaction, just truth. Naomi gathered her folder and slid the papers inside. When she looked up again, she caught Thompson's gaze and gave him a faint nod. "Lock up when you're done. Tomorrow we start rebuilding." He nodded back, a glimmer of pride in his tired eyes. Naomi turned toward the glass doors. The rain had stopped completely. The sky outside was clearing, and the streetlights threw golden reflections across the wet pavement. As she stepped forward, every eye followed her. The doors opened with a soft hiss, letting in a gust of clean, salt-scented air. She paused at the threshold and glanced over her shoulder. Becky sat slumped behind the counter, her resignation paper still wet from tears. Miguel stood quietly to one side, watching Naomi like someone who'd just seen the world tilt and land in its rightful place. Thompson was already wiping down the counter, steady, grounded, as if reclaiming the space one slow motion at a time. Naomi breathed in the cool air and said softly, "This is where change begins." Then she stepped outside into the night. The door closed behind her with a soft click that sounded to everyone left inside like the end of an era. By the time the clock above the reception desk struck 12:30, the lobby had emptied of everyone who didn't belong to the night itself. The tourists had drifted upstairs, whispering into their phones. The couple from the bar had slipped away to tell the story in some other corner of town. And Lydia had ended her live stream with a shaky voice that still trembled from what she'd witnessed. Only the staff remained, tired, pale, waiting for a verdict that hung in the air like the smell of rain after lightning. Naomi stood where she had been all night, her bag on the counter, her posture straight and composed. Her eyes, though, were heavy, not with anger, but with something older, deeper, disappointment. She looked at the people in front of her one by one, her voice calm when she finally spoke. "I told you earlier there were 3 choices. Now I'm going to give them to you again, and this time I want you to really listen." Her tone carried the weight of a teacher who had outlasted her patience, but not her belief that lessons could still be learned. "First, resign tonight, quietly. I'll make sure your records show neutral references. You'll walk away with a chance to start over. Second, termination for cause, effective immediately. That means you leave with nothing but your name on a list that will follow you wherever you go. Third, a corporate investigation. It'll drag on for months, every detail public, every camera angle, every witness statement. You'll live under a microscope until the company's lawyers finish what your conscience didn't. You have 1 minute to decide." Becky sat motionless, her mascara bleeding into gray half-moons under her eyes. Kyle looked down at his boots, his shoulders slumped. Miguel hovered near the back wall, silent but alert, like a man watching a fire he couldn't put out. Thompson leaned against the doorframe to the kitchen, arms crossed, steady and watchful. The only sound was the generator humming and the soft crackle of distant thunder. Becky was the first to speak. Her voice was hoarse. "You said neutral reference if I resign?" Naomi nodded. "That's correct." Becky rubbed at her eyes with the back of her hand, smearing the last of her makeup. "Then that's what I'll do." She reached for the pen lying beside her resignation form, but her fingers shook so badly she could barely hold it. I didn't think. I saw you and I thought." Naomi cut her off gently. "I know what you thought. The question is whether you'll ever stop thinking that way." Becky's mouth quivered. She signed her name quickly, the sound of the pen scratching paper loud in the still air. When she finished, she pushed the paper toward Naomi and whispered, I'm sorry. Naomi looked at her for a long moment. Apologies are for the person who says them, not the one who hears them, she said. The work comes after. Becky's face crumpled, but she didn't speak again. She stood slowly, clutching her purse like a lifeline, and walked toward the elevator without another word. The soft ding of the closing doors was the only farewell she got. Naomi turned to Kyle next. The guard straightened, trying to muster some kind of dignity. I got kids, he said quietly. They need the insurance. I'll resign. You understand what that means, Naomi said. He nodded. Yeah, I do. She slid the form across the counter, and he signed it without looking at her. His name was bold and heavy, written by a man used to putting weight behind his choices. When he was done, he placed the pen down carefully, as if closing a ritual, and said, Ma'am, for what it's worth, I know you were right to do what you did. Naomi studied him. Then make sure they grow up to be better than we were. He gave a small, grateful nod and left without another sound. When the lobby doors shut behind him, Naomi exhaled slowly, her shoulders easing for the first time in hours. The tension that had held the room together seemed to dissolve. Miguel stepped forward, uncertain. Ma'am, what about me? You're staying, she said simply. You listened when nobody else did. That's how change starts. He blinked, almost disbelieving. You mean I still have a job? You have more than that, Naomi said. You have responsibility. She turned to Thompson. And you, Mr. Thompson, if you're still willing, I'd like you to help rebuild this place. He gave a slow smile that carried both relief and sorrow. Been waiting to hear that for 20 years, he said. Guess tonight was finally the night. Naomi nodded. Tomorrow, the reform begins. New leadership, new training, new culture. But for now, there's one last thing I need to do. She picked up her folder again and pulled out a fresh sheet of paper. Her pen glided across it with careful, deliberate strokes. When she was done, she slid it to the edge of the counter for Miguel to see. It read immediate suspension, Haven Shore night staff, pending retraining and compliance evaluation. Beneath that, her signature, steady, elegant, undeniable. Miguel stared at it, his voice barely above a whisper. You really do mean to change everything. I don't mean to, she said softly. I will. Becky's abandoned coffee cup still sat near the register, lipstick mark fading into the porcelain. Naomi stared at it for a long second, as if weighing the residue of all that had happened here. Then she turned to Miguel. Clean this place up, she said. Not just the counters, the energy, the way it breathes. The walls remember everything that's said inside them. Tomorrow, we start teaching them something new. Miguel smiled faintly. Yes, ma'am. Thompson straightened. And what about tonight? You should rest. Naomi shook her head. Rest comes later. She picked up her phone again and dialed. Janet Davis, this is Naomi Carter, she said when the line clicked open. Yes, I know what time it is. We have a situation that requires immediate attention. Send in Kesha Williams from Boston, full authority to implement reforms. There was a pause on the other end. Then Naomi said, Yes, Kesha. She's the best for this. And call Dr. Amanda Foster. We'll need her team here in 48 hours for mandatory inclusion and bias training. She listened, nodded once, and ended the call. Miguel blinked. All that's really happening? It's already happening, Naomi said. For a moment, no one spoke. Outside, the sea sighed against the shoreline, the tide sliding over wet sand. Inside, the air felt different, lighter, as if the hotel itself had begun to exhale. Naomi looked at the people who remained, her voice soft but carrying the strength of something final. Change doesn't start with a press release or a headline, she said. It starts with the people who stay after everyone else walks out. Miguel nodded slowly. Then we'll stay. Thompson smiled, that deep, knowing smile of someone who'd seen enough endings to recognize a beginning. We'll be here in the morning, ma'am. Naomi gave them both a look that carried gratitude without words. She gathered her papers and walked toward the elevator. The carpet muffled her footsteps, and when the doors opened, the reflection staring back at her in the mirrored walls looked tired but steady. She pressed the button for the top floor and let the doors close around her. As the elevator rose, she let her head fall back and breathed for the first time that night. Beneath the hum of the motor and the whisper of the cables, she could still hear the faint echo of the rain easing away. The hotel, once full of arrogance and noise, was finally quiet. And for the first time since she walked through its doors, Naomi Carter allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, this was the start of something that would last. Morning came soft and golden, washing the Haven Shore Hotel in the kind of light that makes even old mistakes look forgiven. The sea outside was calm again, stretching smooth and silver under the pale dawn. Naomi stood by the tall window of the penthouse suite, coffee in hand, watching waves crawl across the sand like they were starting over, too. The events of the night before replayed quietly in her mind, not as anger, but as something steadier, something that felt like clarity. Down below, workers moved through the lobby, mopping, rearranging, opening blinds that had stayed closed too long. It was the same building, but it no longer felt like the same place. The door behind her opened with a soft click. Miguel stepped in, still in his uniform but with a pressed shirt this time, a nervous energy buzzing in his movements. "Good morning, Miss Carter," he said. His voice carried a kind of careful pride, the kind that belongs to someone who still can't quite believe he's allowed to stand where he is. "Good morning, Miguel," Naomi said. "How's the lobby?" "Different," he said. "Quiet, but not the bad kind. Mr. Thompson's down there talking to the new cleaning crew. Said you wanted to hire locally." "I do," Naomi said, turning to face him. "I want this place to belong to the city again. No more corporate strangers running it like a luxury cage." Miguel smiled. "We've already had 2 guests stop by just to say they saw the video. One woman said she booked a weekend stay because she wanted to see where justice lived." Naomi chuckled softly, shaking her head. "Justice doesn't live in a hotel, Miguel. It lives in people who decide to be better than yesterday." He nodded, though his eyes stayed on her like he was studying something deeper. "You really mean to rebuild this whole place, don't you?" "I meant it when I said it last night," she replied. "We're not patching cracks. We're pouring new concrete." Miguel hesitated. "Can I ask something? When Becky was begging you, did you ever feel sorry for her?" Naomi set her cup down. "I did," she said after a pause, "but not because she lost her job. I felt sorry that she thought her uniform made her worth more than the people she was meant to serve. That's a harder kind of poverty to fix." He looked down, absorbing the words. Outside, a gull swooped low across the surf, calling once before vanishing toward the horizon. The moment held quiet grace, the kind that didn't need to be explained. Later that morning, Naomi and Thompson walked the property together. The old chef's coat had been replaced by a crisp polo with the new logo, Carter & Co. Haven Shore. The rebranding banner hung above the entrance, blue and white like the sea. Workers were setting up new signage inside. Every guest has a story. "Looks good," Thompson said, shading his eyes with one broad hand. "Never thought I'd live to see this place owned by someone who actually gives a damn." Naomi smiled. "You were part of the reason it happened, you know. People notice when someone stands up quietly instead of watching wrong things go by." He chuckled. "Quiet's easy when you're too old to care who's listening." Then his expression turned thoughtful. "You sure about making Miguel your assistant manager? He's young." "He's green," Naomi agreed, "but his heart's right. I can teach skill. I can't teach empathy." They stopped by the front doors, watching a delivery truck unload boxes of new training materials, binders, tablets, the things corporate reform always needed. But this time the difference wasn't in the paperwork, it was in the people holding it. Lydia arrived at that moment, hair tied back, a press badge hanging from her neck. She carried her camera like an extension of herself. "Miss Carter," she called out, smiling. "You weren't kidding about reform. This place looks alive." Naomi laughed softly. "Alive and slightly sleep-deprived, but yes." "Do you mind if I film a short follow-up for my channel?" Lydia asked. "People are calling what you did a masterclass in leadership." Naomi shook her head gently. "Film whatever you need, but don't make it about me. Make it about what's possible when people choose decency." Lydia lowered the camera for a moment. "You know I've covered a lot of stories, but that night, watching you stay calm while everyone else fell apart, it changed something in me. I thought justice had to be loud to be real. You showed it could whisper and still be heard." Naomi's eyes softened. Whispering is often the only way to make people listen long enough to change. The camera light blinked on, and Lydia began filming as Naomi addressed the small group of new employees gathered near the desk. Some were nervous, others curious, a few clearly inspired. Naomi's voice filled the space with quiet authority. "This hotel's reputation won't be built on marble floors or ocean views," she said. "It'll be built on how people feel when they walk through these doors. Respect is not an extra amenity. It's the foundation of hospitality. You're not just employees. You're stewards of dignity. Every guest you serve is a chance to prove that this place remembers what humanity looks like." Thompson nodded to himself, his chest swelling with pride. Miguel stood at the edge of the group, trying not to smile too wide, though his eyes betrayed him. When Naomi finished, there was a small ripple of applause, soft, hesitant at first, then genuine. Lydia lowered her camera again. "Perfect," she said. "That's the clip I'll end with. It'll remind people this wasn't just drama, it was transformation." "Transformation," Naomi repeated quietly, glancing around the lobby. The chandeliers sparkled under clean light, the scent of new polish mixing with salt air. "That's a good word for it." Later, when the sun started to dip toward the horizon, Naomi found herself alone on the terrace overlooking the water. The wind tugged lightly at her jacket, carrying the sound of laughter from the staff below, real laughter, the kind that had been absent the night before. She closed her eyes for a moment, letting the sound wash over her. Thompson joined her quietly, holding 2 mugs of tea. "Thought you might want one," he said. "It's ginger. Heard you like it." She smiled, accepting it. "You remembered," he shrugged. "Some things are worth remembering." They stood there in companionable silence, watching the sky turn shades of gold and violet. Down on the boardwalk, a few locals walked dogs, and a little girl ran ahead of her parents, her laughter carried by the wind. "This place will be different now," Thompson said. "It already is," Naomi replied. "The walls feel lighter." He chuckled. "Never thought I'd hear a CEO talk about walls feeling lighter." "I stopped being just a CEO a long time ago," she said softly. "Titles don't fix things. People do." Thompson nodded, taking a slow sip of his tea. "Guess that's true for most of life." As twilight deepened, the hotel lights flickered on, bathing the new sign in a warm glow. Carter & Co., Haven Shore. Every guest has a story. Naomi felt something stir in her chest, a small ache of relief and pride intertwined. Maybe justice wasn't a battle to be won, but a promise to keep. Every day, one act at a time. She looked over at Thompson. "Tomorrow, we start the first training. After that, the Guest Dignity Initiative rolls out nationwide." "You ready for that?" He smiled. "Been ready for 20 years, ma'am." Naomi laughed softly, raising her mug. "Then here's to 20 more." The waves broke softly against the sand below, each one carrying a quiet rhythm that matched the steady pulse of something new being born. In the reflection of the glass behind her, Naomi could see the lobby glowing with life again, no longer haunted by shame, but alive with purpose. For the first time in a long while, she felt peace, not the fragile kind that hides from conflict, but the kind that comes after you faced it and stayed standing. She took another sip of tea, the warmth of it grounding her, and whispered to herself, "This is how we rebuild." 3 months later, the ocean wore its Sunday best blue, and the Haven shore breathed like a place that had learned how to be kind. Tourists drifted through the lobby with an ease that hadn't existed before, the kind that comes when a building understands its purpose again. The ratings on the travel sites had climbed in quiet increments, 3.2, 3.8, 4.3, and last week the number settled at 4.7, the sort of score that makes strangers trust you before they've met you. Revenue had followed, not like a firework but like tide, patient and certain, up 38% without a single discount campaign. The story had traveled farther than the storm. Churches in North Charleston preached about it. A middle school civics class sent a poster. A bus driver told a passenger she'd watched the video and cried on her lunch break. Justice had not screamed. It had done something harder. It had stayed. Naomi walked the corridor alone that morning, running her fingers along the cool curve of the new brass rail. The carpet smelled faintly of citrus and salt, the old chemical tang replaced by something warmer. She paused at the edge of the lobby where sunlight pooled on the marble, catching in the gold letters of a small plaque set at knee height, near the exact spot where a black metal card had once rattled loud enough to wake a conscience. The plaque read, "In honor of every guest once turned away, May your story always find a door that opens. Miguel was already at the front desk, tie straight, posture tall in a way it hadn't been before. Responsibility found him. He'd grown into the uniform without letting it shrink his heart. "Morning, Miss Carter," he said, handing her a tablet. "Daily summary. Dignity reports are green across the board. 2 compliments came in overnight. One about Rosa in housekeeping singing to a nervous little boy while his mom checked in, and one about Mr. Thompson bringing hot tea to a guest who couldn't sleep." Naomi smiled. "Tell Rosa she has a voice for management, and remind Thompson he doesn't have to fix everything with a kettle." She glanced over the rest of the report. The QR system had become something more than a complaint box. It was a conversation now, a way for guests to name kindness when they saw it, and for staff to see themselves as more than hands delivering towels. "Any issues?" Miguel shook his head. "Only the coffee machine on the 3rd floor again. It's old. We'll swap it today." He hesitated, then added with a shy pride he couldn't hide, "We're fully booked this weekend. Local festival. People say they picked us because they trust the place that did the right thing." "Rack trust is a better advertisement than billboards," Naomi said, "and it's cheaper." Mr. Thompson emerged from the elevator wearing the title he'd never asked for, but wore like it had always belonged to him, Guest Dignity Officer, stitched in understated thread above his name. He carried a small stack of brochures about bystander intervention, the new program he'd helped Kesha Williams roll out. "We're ready," he said. "They're setting the chairs now." The ceremony was small on purpose. No ribbon to slice, no podium higher than a handshake, just a circle of chairs and a room prepared to mean what it said. A dozen staff members took seats: front desk, housekeeping, night security, a young bellman who spent his days whistling Motown under his breath. A few regular guests had asked to attend. One of them, a retired nurse from Ohio, brought cookies she'd baked in her rental kitchen. Lydia set a camera on a tripod in the corner. "No live stream tonight. Only a recording for the people who couldn't be there but needed to hear." Kesha stood beside Naomi, sharp-eyed and unflappable, the kind of leader who makes policy sound like a promise. "We could list metrics," she said to the room, "and we will, because numbers matter. But numbers aren't why we're here. We're here because somewhere along the way, hospitality forgot it was a human word. Tonight we remember." Naomi stepped forward. She held the plaque in both hands, the way you hold something living. "There was a night when this floor felt colder than tile ought to feel," she said, voice steady. "Some of you were here. Some of you watched. Some of you came after because you heard and wanted to help make sure it never happened again. What changed this place wasn't my title. Titles are coats. You hang them up at the end of the day. What changed this place was a flock of small choices made by ordinary people at ordinary hours. Rosa singing, Miguel listening, Thompson standing still when standing still was the bravest thing. Lydia turning a camera into a window instead of a weapon. We didn't build a new hotel. We remembered how to be decent." She set the plaque into its brass bracket, and the little click it made settling into place sounded like something difficult finally fitting. There was gentle applause, and then the kind of hush that isn't empty but full, like church after a hymn when the last note still trembles in the rafters. After the ceremony, people drifted to the edges of the room for coffee and conversation. A guest in a Navy ball cap told Thompson about a time years ago when he'd been shooed out of a lobby because he wasn't wearing a jacket. "I never forgot," the man said. "This place helped fix a little piece of that." Thompson squeezed his shoulder once and sent him off with a laugh. Lydia found Naomi by the window. "I cut together the follow-up," she said. "It's not a victory reel. It's quiet. Staff voices, guests reading their own dignity reports, a grandmother from Savannah talking about how her grandson carried her bag without being asked. I thought, if the internet can make a mess travel fast, maybe it can make mending travel too." Naomi looked at her, at the camera hanging easy in her hand now, no longer a shield. "Run it," she said, "not for views. For whoever needs to know they're not crazy for wanting better." Lydia hesitated, then asked the question she'd held since the storm night. "Do you forgive them?" "Becky, Kyle." Naomi watched the palm fronds tip their green hands toward the light. "Forgiveness is a door you open from the inside," she said. "Sometimes you open it slow, Sometimes you wait until you've changed the locks. I don't hold them in my mouth anymore. That's as close as I know how to get." "Does that feel like peace?" Lydia asked. "It feels like space," Naomi said, "and space is where peace learns how to live." They stood together for a while, not talking, just sharing the view of a sea that had outlasted every storm by being patient. When Naomi turned, she noticed a family stepping into the lobby. A mother with silver hair like spun light, a teenage granddaughter with a backpack covered in patches, a middle-aged son carrying a cooler like it was the Ark. The girl looked around, mouth open. "It's so pretty," she said, and when her grandmother nodded, Naomi felt absurdly like she'd been given a grade that mattered more than 4.7. Miguel moved to greet them, not hurrying but not dragging his feet either, a steady rhythm he'd learned from watching tides and people. "Welcome to Haven Shore," he said, voice warm. "May I help you check in?" The grandmother smiled, and Naomi watched the exchange like someone watching a sapling catch sun. Tender now, but you could already see the tree. Near noon, a reporter from the local paper asked for a quote. Naomi avoided the language leaders always use when they're trying not to admit they were once lost. She said only, "We're growing into our promise," and left it there. The reporter smiled like she'd been handed the line she hoped for, and not the one she expected. Later, Naomi walked the back hallway to the employee lounge. The bulletin board had lost its faded dance flyers and gained a map of Charleston dotted with pins. Each pin a nonprofit the hotel now supported. After-school reading programs, a shelter that needed bedding more than speeches, a small theater where kids were learning to shout lines on a stage so they might not shout them at each other in the street. A printed card above the map read, "If you need a reason, choose a neighbor." She found Thompson in the kitchen, decanting sweet tea into a glass pitcher with the care of a pharmacist. "You're spoiling them," she said. He winked. "A little sugar never hurt a culture if it's poured with a steady hand." "Put that on a mug," she said, and they laughed the easy laugh of people who see each other truly. In the late afternoon, Naomi stepped outside. The boardwalk was busy, dogs and strollers and couples walking like the day belonged to them. The hotel's new sign caught the light, Carter & Co., Haven Shore. Every guest has a story. And for once, it didn't feel like a slogan that marketing wrung dry. It felt like a sentence people could live inside. She took her phone from her pocket and turned the camera toward herself. Not a performance face, just the one she wore when the workday had sanded her down to what mattered. She began recording without a script. "Some of you watched a hard night here," she said, the wind tugging her words just enough to make them sound human. "You asked what came after. This is the after. It's not shiny. It's 100 small things done right on purpose. And by right, I mean kind. We used to think respect was a luxury. Add it if you can, comp it if they complain. But respect is the rent we pay for sharing this world. If you see a place, forget that, remind it. If you're the one forgetting, stop. If you were turned away once, I can't fix that night. But we can make sure the next door opens. Your dignity doesn't run out. It doesn't expire with fashion or fortune. It belongs to you because you do." She ended the recording and stood still, letting the quiet return. The door opened behind her, and Miguel stepped onto the steps with a broom he didn't urgently need, just an excuse to breathe the same air she was breathing. "You ready for the evening rush?" he asked. "I think we've been ready for a while," she said. He looked out at the water, then back at her. "My mom came by last week," he said. "She stood in the lobby and said, 'Mio, it smells like hope in here.' I didn't know hope had a smell." "It does," Naomi said. "It smells like clean floors and warm tea and paper signed by people who changed their minds." He laughed. "Then we're stocked." As the sun bent toward the horizon, families drifted out to the sand. A young couple danced barefoot near the waterline to music only they could hear. Two old men argued cheerfully about bait. The world kept doing what it always did, wearing down, building up. Naomi turned back toward the lobby. The plaque caught the last light of the day and held it for a breath, a bright pulse in the corner of her eye. Inside, the evening crew was already humming. Rosa's song floated from the stairwell. Thompson handed a to-go cup to a woman who'd come in from the cold, air-conditioned bus and needed something warm to remind her who she was. Kesha checked a checklist and then tucked it away, satisfied to trust the people more than the paper. Lydia lifted her camera and didn't film. Some moments are better kept unedited, let to live where they happened. Naomi stood in the middle of it and felt the thing she'd been working to feel since the night a storm tried to tell her what wouldn't change. Not victory, not revenge. Something truer and harder won. The knowledge that a place can go from hurting to helping if enough hands keep turning the wheel in the right direction. She took one more look at the door, at the brass letters that would outlast all of them, and then she walked back to the desk where a guest was waiting with a question and a smile. The ocean outside breathed in and out. The hotel answered with its own steady rhythm. And the story, hers, theirs, the one that started with a refusal and ended with a promise, kept going. Not because anyone demanded an ending, but because people in a lobby on the edge of the Atlantic decided to be better, and then were again and again, until the place remembered how.